Skip it up and that up.
Team Deathmatch.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Rich of Review Tech USA, and I'll take you to the rear entrance of the Anal Kingdom. Anal Kingdom. So I wasn't even going to post a video today, but then I found this really interesting article on uprocks.com talking about why the PlayStation brand may be permanently screwed. The author, Dan Seitz, makes 5 interesting points. I'll give my opinion on each point, and then I'll give my final verdict on if I think the PlayStation brand is permanently screwed, or toast, as the article says. So the first thing the article talks about is how Sony lost $45 million last quarter, and how the PSP and PS Vita combined last quarter only sold 1.4 million units. That is rough. 2 different consoles combined can only gather up 1.4 million sales. It's not looking good for the PS Vita. I don't even know if a price drop could help the PS Vita right now. But now let's talk about the 5 different points this article brings up on why the PlayStation brand might be doomed. The first thing it talks about is how publishers are not interested in making games for conventional consoles as much as they used to be. Namco Bandai, Capcom, Sega, and Konami all turned a profit last quarter, but guess what? Not a dime of those profits were made due to selling console games. And because of that, they're being pressured by shareholders to just turn out mobile games. Then say a console like the Ouya takes off in Japan and becomes popular, then forget about it. They'll have their backs even more so against the wall to stop making conventional console games, and we may see a lot of developers just make games for mobile platforms and for the Ouya. I don't want to see that happen, but the writing is on the wall. Also, I forgot to add, the PC is doing very well. Digital distribution sales are up big time with the PC, so the PC may become a big factor with developers. They may start making games to sell on Steam or on Origin. And like the article says, Sony's Safety Zone in Japan is having RPGs on Sony console. But those games aren't technically demanding, and they could easily be sold on mobile platforms or on the Ouya. And if selling it on the mobile platform in Ouya makes the companies more money, they will stop making games for conventional consoles. And for everyone out there who thinks the Tegra 3 chipset that's gonna be in the Ouya and new tablets and new smartphones is not a capable chipset for gaming, take a look at this footage, please. Now, am I saying that the Tegra 3 chipset could outdo the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, or my PC? No, but it's capable enough. That's what I wanted to show with that video. And if the Tegra 3 chipset that's going to be in the Ouya, smartphones, and tablets can allow Square Enix to make a sequel to Final Fantasy 13 run on it, and it's going to make them more money than making it for a conventional console, then that's what's going to happen. I don't want to see it happen. I repeat that. I don't want to see it happen. But unfortunately, money talks, and if they're going to make more money on smaller platforms, then that's where the developers are going to go. The second point the article brings up against the PlayStation is that physical media is not doing well. Sony was hoping that the Blu-ray would do for the PS3 what the DVD did for the PS2, and guess what? That didn't happen. People are just using their PCs or game consoles to stream movies via Netflix or whatever service they have. So what may happen, like the article said, and I totally agree with it, is that for the PS4, they may have to stick to Blu-ray, but Blu-ray may die as a movie format, and I know virtually no one who has a Blu-ray burner in their PC. So Blu-ray may die as a format, but Sony will have to use it in their PS4. And if Blu-ray just becomes a proprietary format that Sony uses, it's going to cost them money, and it's going to hurt Sony in the long run. The Blu-ray definitely didn't become the next DVD like Sony hoped for. The third point the article brings up against the PlayStation brand is that no one really cares about next-gen consoles. No one's looking forward to them, and I agree. See, I'm an old man, so I've been around for many console generations, and back in the day when you went to new generations of hardware, all you had to do was make the hardware more powerful. When you went from NES to Super NES, there was a huge noticeable difference that even the general consumer who isn't a nerd like you or I, they can just see the difference. When you went from Super Mario 3 to Super Mario World, there was a huge difference, and you could see it right away unless you had cataracts. When you went from Castlevania 3 to Super Castlevania 4, huge difference. Even with the Sega Genesis, there was a huge difference when you went from 8-bit to 16-bit, and so on and so forth. When you went from Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis to Sony PlayStation or the Nintendo 64, huge difference in visuals. You went from 2D to 3D. Now it's going to be a tough sell for Sony. Now it's like, okay, I already have the PS3, it already outputs 1080p, I already have games with HD visuals, even though most are sub HD, but it's capable of making 720p and 1080p games. Why the hell am I going to put out $400 or more for a next-gen console when I'm happy with what the current generation of consoles is providing me? Now look, I personally get it. I know the tech in the 360 and PS3 is old, but when I talk to family and friends, they don't care. When they go out and pick up Battlefield 3 for the consoles, I show them it on my PC, and it's like, yeah, it looks better, but I have the same game on the console, and it's just not a big enough jump for me to be craving a next-gen piece of hardware. Now, do I see eye to eye with them? Yes and no, but that's how the general consumer feels. Not the hardcore gamer, but people who just want to play games. They feel the current generation is more than enough for them, and they don't care about tessellation and smoother shadows and better lighting. They can hold off. It isn't like back in the day, like I mentioned before, when people went from the NES to the Super NES. It was a huge noticeable difference that appealed to the general consumer. Times have changed. And if Sony or Microsoft did want to release a console that was a leapfrog in tech from their current generation, it would cost too much, so they can't do it. So that's going to make trying to get the next-gen PlayStation in people's homes an even tougher sell. And also, if the Wii U, from what I'm hearing, is going to be priced at $299, if the Wii U is priced at $299, and it has more powerful tech in it than the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, it's not a huge quantum leap, but it's a substantial leap. It's a noticeable leap. Like Assassin's Creed 3, like I mentioned in another video, is going to run at 1080p at 60 frames per second on the Wii U. If the Wii U is an affordable price of $299, and the tech is good enough to satisfy the general consumer, it is going to be a hell of a chore for both Sony and Microsoft to get their next-gen systems in people's homes. So combine people's lack of interest in next-gen hardware with affordable alternatives from competitors, and the PlayStation brand is in deep trouble. The fourth reason the article brings up that the PlayStation brand is in question is the fact that they have to sell the consoles at a loss. Now, in the past, this worked fine. PlayStation 1, they sold it at a loss. PlayStation 2, they sold it at a loss. It was a surefire thing because the PlayStation brand was so strong back then, and Sony in general was very strong. Now Sony is hurting, and a lot of people don't give a crap about next-gen consoles, so investors are going to be very nervous to stick around for Sony if they try to sell the PS4 at a loss. Now, maybe what they might do is do a $99 upfront fee where they have you under contract for 2 years with the PS4. I know they're doing that with the 360 right now, the Xbox 360, I should say. But I don't know how that whole thing is going to work out. We'll have to wait and see, and investors may still be skittish of that, because what happens if people become delinquent on their payments every month for their 2-year contract of the PS4? Even if they try to put some cancellation fee in the contract, guess what? If people don't want to pay their bill, they're not going to pay it. Whereas when people bought a console in the conventional way, you paid the whole price up front. So the companies got all their money and had nothing to worry about. I mean, with that being said, this does work with cell phones, but it's uncharted territory when it comes to consoles. And because it's uncharted territory, investors still may be nervous to go that route, especially since Sony as an entire company is hurting badly right now. The fifth and final reason this article gives that the PlayStation brand could be screwed is due to Apple. Basically, what the article says is that once Apple takes gaming seriously and incorporates it in all of their hardware, like their Apple TV, their iPhone, their iPad. I'm not talking the games from the App Store. I'm talking streaming games like Battlefield 3, Max Payne, AAA games. It's going to put a hurting on Sony, and eventually they're going to do it according to the article. I mean, I guess Apple could hurt Sony. I mean, they did it when it came to the portable music market. Sony totally dropped the ball on that. But Sony has Gaikai. They just purchased the cloud gaming company Gaikai, and cloud gaming still has years and years and years to go before it becomes mainstream. There's bandwidth caps across the world. The internet's not fast enough across the world to support HD gaming, so maybe in the future, the semi-distant future, I could see Apple beating up Sony, but not now. And the fifth point this article brings up, I don't think is relevant to the PlayStation brand being destroyed. So, final verdict time. Do I think the PlayStation brand is screwed? Not necessarily. I think it will survive, but I think Sony needs to make some big changes as a whole. They need to streamline all of their products. They don't need 70 different TVs. They don't need 30 different HD camcorders. They don't need a bunch of useless MP3 Walkmans that no one is buying. They need to streamline the products that they sell, and they need to start to innovate again. Back in the 80s and 90s, when you thought of innovation, you thought of Sony. Now you don't think of Sony anymore. Sony always seems to be behind everyone else. So the bottom line is, I do think the PlayStation brand will survive, but Sony as a whole, beyond the PlayStation, they need to innovate, and they need to streamline, and they need to rethink their whole business structure, because right now it's not working for Sony. I'm not just talking about PlayStation, I'm talking about the company as a whole. They are hurting big time financially right now, so something needs to change. But I do think the PlayStation brand will survive. So what's your take on this article? Do you agree and think the PlayStation brand is screwed permanently, or do you think Sony has a chance to innovate and turn everything around? Make sure to rate, comment, favorite, and subscribe, and if you have an interesting news story you would like me to discuss, private message me with a link on either G2B or YouTube, and if I use your news story, I will give you a shout out in the video and feature your YouTube channel in the description.